Hello, welcome. We are so excited to be talking with you all tonight about Cuba's agricultural transition and the Organic Growers School Agroecology Tours to Cuba. So thanks for indicating your interest and for signing up to join us. And for those of you just tuning in live, welcome. We're happy to have you. So I'm just going to start by introducing myself in OGS, and I'm going to be joined in a few minutes by my wonderful collaborators, Malia and Andrea, who are going to be talking a little bit more in detail about the trip. So looking forward to this evening. I'll just say, if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask, anything that you feel isn't being addressed by what we're discussing, please feel free, whichever platform you're watching on, Facebook or YouTube, please feel free to just post a question or comment in the comment box, and we will see it and do our best to get to that question. So my name is Avi. I'm the program coordinator at the Organic Growers School. I am going to be leading the trip this year, and I'm so excited to be doing that because actually one of the reasons I took this job at OGS is that I had the privilege of traveling to Cuba on a sustainable agriculture course while in college, and it was just really life-changing. And when I saw that there was an organization offering a similar trip, it was just really inspiring and gave me a really good feeling about that organization, given all the vitriol and misinformation that there is out there about Cuba. And yeah, it's an incredible place to visit. It's an incredible opportunity to learn both about just sustainable agriculture in general, but also about the story of the Cuban people in their transition towards sustainable agriculture and agroecology. So just a little bit of history about this particular program. It started as a collaboration with the organization Food First in 2018. They have been leading food sovereignty trips to Cuba for years. Malia, who will be speaking later, formerly served on their board and just has been super involved in that throughout the years. So this trip is still very much inspired by the curriculum that they originally formulated and continues to be influenced by Malia's relationship to Cuba. And we're also doing this always in partnership with Altruvistas, which is Malia's philanthropic travel organization, which she will speak on a little bit more later. And I want to also give you all a little bit of background on the Organic Growers School. So I'm going to share my screen quickly. One moment. Here we are. So OGS is the premier provider of practical and affordable organic education in the Southern Appalachians. We offer year-round programming for consumers, growers, farmers at all levels to inspire them to continue and support their journeys towards sustainable living. In addition to our sort of flagship event, which is the Spring Conference, we offer programs such as the currently ongoing gardening series for folks seeking to grow for subsistence or for their community. We have a year-long Farm Beginnings program that guides new farmers through how to establish and set up their farming operations, and the Collaborative Regional Alliance for Farmer Training in this region, among others. I encourage you to check out our website to find out more about those programs if you're a farmer or grower and seeking some additional support or education in your endeavors. And the Cuba Agroecology Tour is just so important to us in our mission because it offers another opportunity to really get growers and consumers excited about different organic methods and to build solidarity with growers in Cuba. Because agroecology has been practiced throughout Cuba for so many years, they have so many lessons that we can learn from. And yeah, particularly about scaling up agroecology and operating just in an entirely different economic system. So this slide gives you just some information about the tours. We do have, registration is open now currently for 3 tours, and they've just been so popular that we've added this year 2 additional tours. We usually only have one. So the first one is coming up in June, and then the second one will be in November, and then the third will be in January. And so we might talk a little bit later about the difference traveling in different seasons. But if you're ready to register now, you can head on over to our website and do that immediately. And I will just say, we'll talk a little bit about funding opportunities later, but we do still have scholarships open for both the November and January trips, but we are all booked up in terms of scholarships for the June trip. So I will stop sharing that. And before I just pass it on to my colleagues, Andrea and Malia, I'm going to just play a quick sort of testimonial tour to give you sort of a primer on what the trip looks like.
Yeah, I'm Sarah Deva, and I'm a coordinator at Organic Growers School, and I'm here facilitating and organizing the agroecology tour of Cuba.
Huge shout out to the Organic Growers School. Also this week has been inspiring and radical and beautiful. And it's just been amazing to see the resiliency of farmers internationally.
I would recommend this trip to anyone who has the ability to go. Yeah, it's life-changing, and not in a way that, I don't mean to really romanticize Cuban agriculture, even though I've been a long-term fanatic of Cuban agriculture, but I mean just like the perspective and intricacy that I've gained on this trip about so many things, from agriculture to the Cuban economy to the global economy to U.S. imperialism to life and spirituality through food production. It's been a really, really wonderful experience, and I hope to come back.
Yeah, so the Organic Growers School, I'm so glad that they have organized this trip to Cuba and have done what they've done, because all the places they're able to take you, all the different farms, it's amazing, and we wouldn't be able to go to these places without them, and I'm so glad we've been able to see all the different methods these different farms have been using, and it's amazing.
Would I recommend this trip to someone who is thinking about it? Yes, absolutely. I feel like a lot of people have Cuba, have some sort of knowledge or some sort of idea of Cuba. It's sort of a forbidden fruit to us, and I think that this organization and this trip allows you to come and get a bit of culture and get food and staying at the casas and meeting some of the mamas and being in the neighborhoods and being cared for and being safe and having that itinerary. And tomorrow we have a free day, and so I think that this gives someone that wants to come to Cuba the opportunity to do that and to actually learn something, and to, you can't come here. I mean, you can come here and do whatever you want, you can go anywhere and do whatever you want, but coming here the first time without that support seems overwhelming, so I think that this does give you the perfect opportunity to come here and get a taste for that Cuban life.
All right, so now we're going to move into a bit of a discussion portion. I'm going to bring in Malia and Andrea and let them just take over. Thanks, y'all.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Hi, Malia. So good to see you.
Hey, good morning. Buenos dias. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes.
Yeah, different time zones. So I will go first, and then I want you to introduce yourself to everybody out there, and then we'll kind of do a question answer content after that. Okay. All right. So I am Andrea Brown, and I just kind of stumbled across Organic Growers School, I think by accident, but it's such a happy accident. I used to work as a farm service provider, and I worked primarily in Georgia, and I wanted to, so I signed up for this newsletter at some point. But as happenstance would have it, I got the information about this trip around December or so. So I'm excited about going to Cuba. I'm excited about it because I'm interested in the history of the people. I'm interested in sustainable agriculture. I'm a photographer, so I want to take pictures of a beautiful place that I've never been. So that's who I am. And I'm working with the Organic Grower School now and helping them organize this trip for other people who may have the same interests that I do in the culture, in the food, in the beauty, in the people. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, and then we're going to dig into our questions because I know other people want to know some of the things that I want to know about traveling to Cuba.
Beautiful. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Good day. It's an honor to be here. And I always say it's such an incredible honor to be collaborating and partnering also with Organic Grower School. My gosh, it's really evolved and co-evolved our programs over the last few years. So just quickly, my backstory is I have extended familia in Cuba. I went to Cuba the first time myself in 1991, and it was really incredible. I had backpacked and traveled all over the world and really didn't know too much about Cuba. It was a place that I felt was really demonized, and my particular family, and also just growing up in the mass media. And when I went there the first time, it just blew open my mind and blew open my heart. I saw a system that was really different, of course, than the one we had grown up with here in the United States. And at the same time, it was incredibly inspirational. I feel like, here there's so much on the me and the we, and there it's the we, and so over the me. And so just looking at how the system was different, but really prioritized its people in terms of its, social wellness and institutions was really incredible and motivating. So my backstory is I've worked in educational and socially responsible travel for, oh my goodness, I was going to say going on 3 decades now. It's been a labor of love as an educator and social justice, ecological justice advocate. And so I take those two lenses together and, of course, provide really unique travel experiences for others that are based on what we call philanthropic and socially responsible travel, which means around the world, the majority of the time, of course, is ethical based in terms of its qualitative programming. We make sure that, of course, you're meeting with really unique voices from the grassroots to the grass tops. You'll meet with people in the case of Cuba, who work for the Ministry of Agriculture, who can tell you about the 5-year plan. We meet with my dear friend, for example, Pepe Morales, who's retired from CIMAG, the Center for land animals and husbandry, and from the Ministry of course, of Agriculture. And you learn about, again, the history of agriculture in Cuba. And really importantly, from just a grassroots activist point of view, just local farmers and looking at the different models of growing food and providing food security on the island of Cuba, with cooperatives and family farms and things like that, and learning about the land reform movement that took place, of course, in the 60s. So the trip is really rich in terms of that. Those different stories. And we'll go in a little bit more to the itinerary and the why for sustainability and why for agriculture in a little bit, so I won't be redundant. But what I will say just about the relationship, 7 years ago, I started Altruistas with the idea that we could be in service through travel. So again, they're educational, they're really meant to inspire, they're supposed to support our local partners like Organic Grower School, and the money supports, of course, the great organization and the work that you all are doing in the Appalachia area. And, to our Cuban counterparts. And so I can get in a little bit about that later on as well. But I just will say it's an honor. And with regards to Food First, yes, I was on their board for 12 years. I'm an urban ag girl. And just on a personal level, I'm calling in today from Hawaii, where I have a 3-acre homestead. And I'll be getting my hands dirty later with some mamaki in the field. So it's something that I definitely have a shared love. I shared with Andrea earlier that one of the reasons I love working with Organic Grower School on a personal level is, it's, yes, I love what I do for all my clients. I'm not going to say I don't, but just the ability for farmers to be able to take time out of your busy growing season, or those that are involved with, food policy or nutrition or wellness or, equity within our food justice movements. It's a really important time just to bond together, traveling together as people with shared passion. And learning a different model, and then sharing what works for you with your counterparts in Cuba, and having that exchange, and at the same time with each other, and then maybe learning something about the Cuban model and how they were able to, of course, survive the special period, and of course now with incredible increased food insecurity because of course COVID and the economic challenges. So again, I'm really excited to work and partner with Organic Growers School. So thank you again for our continued relationship. It gets better and better every year.
Beautiful. I can hear the excitement in your voice. So I'm excited to get started. And you've already given us a really great overview of some of the things that we're going to talk about, but I want to slow it down just a little bit and really dig into it, because we're talking to people who maybe have never been to Cuba, haven't been there in a long time, and not really sure why this would be a good opportunity for them. So we want to inspire people, right? Like, I'm already inspired because I'm a photographer. I get to take pictures. I get to see the food. We want to inspire people who may not be inspired yet. So why Cuba? What is the significance of Cuba and the sustainable agriculture movement? And why should people choose to travel to Cuba with you and your organization and OGS?
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I feel like I could talk for 10 days. But I'll try to keep it short. And feel free to, like, Malia, keep it short. But what I will say is, one of the things that I think is just incredibly powerful about, Cuba and sustainability and agriculture is that it provides a model for what is possible when our systems are in collapse. And so what do I mean by that? Well, of course, for those of us who remember the Cold War and the geopolitics of the East versus West in the United States and the Soviet Union and, this particular period of time, what we need to realize is, Cuba was in trading relationships and an socioeconomic relationship with the Eastern European trading bloc, with Comecon, and of course with Russia or the Soviet Union and, the other Eastern European trading bloc countries. So what happened is, when, of course, the bloc collapsed in the 80s, so did Cuba's fundamental economy. Who were its trading relationships and trading partners? And obviously, literally, like overnight, you had a massive collapse of the economy. So 85% reduction of imports overnight, 70% reduction, at least, of your purchasing power as a nation state. So what does that mean for farmers and people that are growing food? Well, if you had monocultural crop production of primary crops like tobacco or coffee or sugar, which was the mainstay of course, the export commodity market with Cuba, all of a sudden you have no artificial imports. You don't have your imported fertilizers. You don't have your pesticides. You don't have the petroleum coming in the country anymore to run your tractors. And so how are you going to, as a nation state and decision makers and as a community, going to take care of your people so they don't starve? And Cuba already, of course, because it's a centrally planned economy in many ways and a socialist leaning or socialist government, the needs of the people become, of course, the paramount strategy for, how are we going to take care of our people? So in Cuba, there's something called a libreta, where, all of our families have a little booklet and you get your rations, every day for your family. So there's basic nutritional guaranteed livelihood, literally, some chicken, some rice, some bread, some whatever is available, pretty much, that is distributed amongst the population. So during what's called the special period, El Periodo Especial, so Cuba was living right after this collapse, basically in a time of military peace, but in a time of war, right, and need. So again, how are you going to survive when your economy just totally collapsed? And as an island economy, it's insular. And so that was the one huge impact that created the special period. The other was, for those of you who don't know about U.S. foreign policy towards Cuba, Cuba's a very close neighbor. It's like 90 miles right off of Florida, 45 minutes on your flight from Miami, a little longer from those of y'all coming from the Carolinas or Virginia. But, what we have is what they call in Cuba a blockade against the island nation of Cuba. Or, a lot of us in the United States will say it's an embargo. And what does an embargo mean to do? I mean, it's a policy that is directed by the United States to basically starve a population into submission for political change. We don't like the fact that, Cuba has a socialist government, Fidel Castro, et cetera, et cetera. But, it's easy to demonize, a person as being a dictator and these kinds of things without looking at the larger organizational structure and systems within Cuba that did absolutely benefit so many of just average people in Cuba that were lifted up by the revolution, you know, through education and healthcare and basic food needs and land reform. And, you know, United Fruit Company was kicked out and the land holdings of the Catholic Church were diminished. And, you know, there were so many of those changes which infuriated an elite class of Cubans and others who maybe felt very scared by that systemic change, but it really benefited just a tremendous amount of people. So when you go to Cuba and, you know, you're seeing the legacy of what happened in the early 90s, for example, through this crisis, it is inspirational. You know, what happens all of a sudden if we don't have those farming inputs? You know, how do we incorporate integrated pest management strategies and like California worms, you know, and all these other strategies towards organic. So the legacy of that in a concrete meaning today is that 85% of all of the Cuban locally grown food products are organic. It works better for your soil, it's better for people, it's better for the plants. So there's that story that's concrete. So you get to learn how they did it, what the successes are, what the challenges are. And of course, one of the things that's new right now is, you know, how are we getting through this crisis of COVID with food security, and what does that mean? So imports are still heavily reliant in Cuba, you know, just like here in Hawaii or Puerto Rico, our brothers and sisters and other island equatorial nations, you know, you have to import things, you know, rice and soy and corn. And, you know, there's other products, of course, that the nation is very dependent on the importation of. And so again, you know, you have to have hard currency in order to exchange in the international market to have these food products come into your nation. So that's an issue. And then you also, in the case of the United States, you know, there were farmers from the South actually sending and having an export license to ship to Cuba, which is really important for the Cuban economy and for their foodstuffs. So these are, of course, under Trump, there was a tightening of the embargo. And to be honest with you, it's existed through every single Democrat or Republican administration since Kennedy. So it's gotten better, of course, under Obama. You know, there was a normalization of relationships, the embassy back open. So there were some really exciting shifts that happened that, of course, were undermined by the Trump administration. So a lot of us are very hopeful that things will, you know, continue to evolve and improve. And for the food security, of course, of Cuba under Biden, but we will see what happens. So again, just to your question, it's just an incredibly inspirational story of when you have civil society and political will that come together, that supported people. So again, it was people got skinny and people suffered, but nobody starved. And, you know, it's just an amazing model of how you go from traditional monocultural crop agriculture to this more biodiverse, crop rotational, sustainable form of agriculture. So there is a great movie called The Power of Community, How Cuba Survived Peak Oil. And a few of the incredible storytellers from that you will actually meet on the trip. And I'm sure Amy and Organic Growers School will share that later. But it's a really inspirational story. So if you feel like you need just a little oomph back, you know, that's one way of doing it. So why they should travel with you? It's hard for me to say me, or us, our team. But of course, I have over, you know, close to 25 years of experience working with Cuba, from health exchanges and educational exchanges and fundraising trips and artists and musicians. I mean, everything we do is collaborative and customized. You know, it's really just for a particular group that has a shared mission and a shared vision. You know, we're not trying to just sell for, you know, just the general kind of market and publication. So again, what I love about the relationship is it's a very curated experience. That's what makes it unique. A lot of people have a cookie cutter model of, you know, just education 101 or culture 101 or your Jazz Fest 101. But what we do, you know, is the curation of the experience. So that's one incredible benefit. And the other is just what I call the transformational philanthropy. I mean, we're building in, you know, living wage, Western wage for our speakers. We're not trying to exploit them, you know, and pay the cheapest we can. So if I'm going to, you know, pay, you know, somebody $150 to come talk story and share their expertise with us, in Mexico or Peru or the United States or in Georgia, I'm going to do the same thing in Cuba or South Africa. So, that's something that you're already built into the price. We're taking care of our relationships, and it's not a spot on. You're not just meeting somebody one time. It's a continual relationship. And then your generosity of spirit also, when we talk about the money, we've arranged these farm to fork lunches, and they don't go through anybody. They're just directly there. So we're like, yeah, we'll throw in $20, and you have this incredible lunch, incredible layout, and all this delicious food right from the land. And that's another way of having that intentional setting up. So your money, your hard resources are staying to benefit your counterparts on the ground in Cuba. So I hope,
Wow.
both of those questions are answered. Thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome. I love the way that you were able to give us a little bit of the historical perspective that we don't always hear in the U.S. We hear one side. We don't hear all sides, of course. And there's more, right? You just touched on a few things that are really important. So one of the things, before I go on to my next question, I do want to remind the audience, please share your questions and we will get to them. There are things that I'm going to ask that you think of that I may not think of. So please put them out there in the chat and we will get to them. One of the things that you said, Malia, was that this is a very curated experience. And when I invited a group of people, the first question I got was, what's the itinerary like? What am I going to be doing there for 10 days? What's the curriculum? So if you can kind of touch on that, what are we doing for 10 days?
Yes, so you are traveling as an intentional community together who have a love of agriculture back home in the United States and, of course, a curiosity for Cuba. For the 10 days, I will say the beginning day is usually the one cookie cutter day. We're going to do an orientation. There'll be a meet and greet. You'll get to know each other. The AV will, of course, facilitate a little bit about how to look at questions of food sovereignty and framing that as a lens. So maybe we're using the same language or sharing that. And you'll have a chance, of course, to meet each other, whether the group is, 6 to 15, those are the usual group sizes. So, there is that deep connection and storytelling that happens. We want you to understand a little bit about the history of Cuba and also of La Habana. So we usually have an architect or urban planner give an overview. So a very condensed, 45-minute, boom, PowerPoint with storytelling and pictures. So you have an understanding of the historical development of Cuba, from kind of who was there, the indigenous communities, to colonialism, to the neocolonialism, and of course with the Spaniards, the little bit of time, 6 months that British had control over the island, and Havana as a harbor, and just the incredible architectural developments of the city. I mean, when you go in Havana, when we do our walking tour of the city, you'll see, for example, the old Spanish water, how do you say that? Aqueducts?
Aqueducts?
In English, aqueduct system, yeah. So that were established from, literally the early 1600s that are still there after 400 years or so, and you're walking over those in the streets of La Habana. So incredible architecture, literally different centuries of architecture. So you will get that sense of where Cuba's history was and where its trajectory is going. Which I think is really important any place we go to. So that's what I mentioned. That's the one little cookie cutter day, because we want you to have that base understanding. But the rest of the time, you are meeting with a representative, if not, the Ministry of the minister or vice minister of the Ministry of Agriculture. So that's why I mentioned the grass tops. It's really important to understand, what are the formal policies and food policies of that. The other is, you're not just in Havana or the cities. We're meeting with organic urban agriculturalists, so local organipónicos, local farms, looking at kind of our Victory Farm model, right? So how do you provide nutritious food close to where people are living? So that's another example. And then the cooperatives, and then you're also as working farmers, you're meeting with your counterparts. You have the chance to talk with farmers and the different cooperatives and that are outside. So I know with AVA, for example, we were discussing the program for June. In June, we'll be traveling from Havana to the western province of Pinar del Rio. and to a place called Viñales in the Viñales Valley. So within that, of course, we'll have the different experiences with the different organizational structures of farmers, and we'll do some service exchange too. That's why, I mean, I'll let Avi get in and tell you like what to pack, make sure you've got your good comfy, shoes, but also get your slickers ready in case there's a little bit of mud or you're on a farm. Right. There's definitely, that that's available. So what I love about those farmer to farmer experiences, you have somebody who's a neophyte or who maybe doesn't farm but is really interested or has just been a backyard gardener. And then you have people who've been farming for decades. And so again, you're asking different questions, you're learning different things. I mean, I can go to that same farm and meet with different farmers and have a different group and have a totally different experience, right? So again, you'll be meeting with lots of different folks. We also try to just build in some things for fun. If anybody who doesn't know, like the Cuban culture and the music and just, of course, yes, la salsa, just the incredible jazz. I mean, Latin jazz and of course, the salsa music and other things and venues. And so things are, of course, opening up. In June, there's Cuba has its own vaccine. I mean, we'll go into COVID in a few minutes, but, we'll be definitely out and about and exposed to, the music and the culture. And again, if there's things that people are really incredibly interested in that aren't on the itinerary, you should definitely chat with Avi and we'll see how we can potentially, kind of ebb and flow some other kinds of things into the program. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, while you were speaking, there was a question that popped up, and I think you addressed it. And the question is the trip targeted for experienced working farmers, or is it okay for less experienced but interested growers too? And I think you touched on that. It's for anybody, it sounds like.
Yeah. It's anybody with I think just anybody with a passion for Cuba and a passion for, food, the sacredness of food, either if it's on your seed, in your seeds or in your plate. So I know like in the past, you may have somebody who's a nutritionist or a dietitian, or maybe your husband or your girlfriend or your son or daughter is a farmer and, you're just interested. So yeah, it's really for anyone. And I actually love that. I love when people have, personally, like when I'm facilitating a trip too, when you have different life experiences and come from different ages and, because you ask different questions and what you're curious about somebody else may not be, but then you're actively learning from what they've been asking as well. So I would say anybody, the trip again is, it's not like you have to be able to hike like 10 miles a day or going in a bus and from one to the other, but it is active, in the sense that you will be walking, you'll be outdoors and there'll be a lot of fresh air and, we'll just, take it take it as it comes, maybe a little bit of a cold front in June. So you'll wear some layers. It could be that the humidity is just starting to heat up a little bit. So it's
beautiful.
Just is what it is.
So I have one more question here, and please, folks, just go ahead and drop your questions in the chat and we will get to them. This is for all of us, right, to get our questions answered. So this one for you, Malia. This writer says, I'm very interested in learning about agriculture, specifically from the Afro-Cuban perspective. Is this intentionally included as part of the program?
That's very thoughtful. Yeah, I meant the island nation of Cuba, even Fidel, basically it said, Cuba is a Black nation, we're an African nation. And so with regards to the melting of the population, the culture, the music, the artwork, the expression of the African roots of Cuba is very, very strong. And so, that's an example of, if people were interested in understanding how the iconography, for example, of the Yoruban culture, of Santeria, the Congo culture, or Angola, presents itself through culture into the different systems and institutions of Cuba. I'm sure we could bring in that as a discussion. When you are in Cuba, you will see who's there and, who's speaking to you and who's not. When you're at the farms, you'll see the mixing, of the population in terms of, what of course people look like who are farming. I would have to look into the research to see is there just an Afro-Cuban farm, but what I can say is if, we let Josetti know to point things out, what some people would not see, if she could point out, you will see it. So for example, when you're in Alamar, so you're in East Havana, and you're at Vivero, which is an amazing organoponico, and Asis Salsines has met and received your group, and of course the other older food sovereignty tours for years. She's an incredible compañera. And actually, unfortunately, they've had a drought and part of the farm just burned, which, anyway, I can share more information about that later as they're reconstructing, and you'll see it as they're rebuilding or replanting, of course. But within that, there is a what we call santo or orisha. So the governing energy, sacred energy of your head is called Orisha Oko. And Orisha Oko is, if you will, like the divine energy or the spirit. Sometimes people say God, but I don't like the word God, but it's the saint or the ruling energy of agriculture and the harvest. And so even when you're in Vivero, you will see like not a shrine or not a temple, but an offering space, a divine offering space to Orisha Oko. So, people just go by, what's that mound? And why does it got like corn and beans and stuff all over it? And is that there's like a cow skull on it? And what is that? Why are there pink beads and blue beads there? And so if you just walk by, it may be a curiosity, but if she explains that this is a cultural, from the Afro-Cuban culture, this is something that is on the farm and it's there. It's a reminder for everybody who's walking by every single day that when we're working with nature and with agriculture, this is also from our ancestors. The religion that is sacred, the earth is sacred, our agricultural farms are sacred. And, it's right there. And so, again, it's one of those things to kind of push out. So I would encourage, whoever's on the trip, and that's really important to continue to ask that. Well, how is this reflected upon, your roots? The same kinds of things with the food. There's words like, you may look at okra, and a lot of people might go, "Ooh, okra." But, I love it. We call it kimbumbo. So there's other kinds of foods, and that have more of that African, roots that are involved with, of course, the food, and within the religion. So. Yeah, it is there. It's always a part of the trips. But, I do trips that are just like on Juneteenth. We've done trips that are just around the Afro-Cuban culture in particular. And so, that can just be a whole focus on its own. But if you go there, every time you're having a conversation, ask that question. Because, where I would say Cuba eradicated institutionalized sexism and institutionalized racism, as we know, racism and sexism and equity is generational. Our struggle is generational. It's not like you just pass the law and say, "Oh, we're all not homophobes anymore, X, Y, or Z." We know that those kinds of oppression and behaviors are passed from one generation to the other. And for example, the LGBT issue, the oppression that our gay brothers and sisters and transgender brothers and sisters may have faced in the 60s and the 70s, even the early 80s, is not the reality now. There's been a huge cultural shift. And the same thing with the gender issues. So, with regards to race, we have had these conversations around what Cuba could have done better to address and support the Afro-Cuban population. And at the same time, there's speakers like Isela Randia, there's filmmakers like Gloria Rolando, and there's others. So we have tried to infuse those voices in the past as an introduction and as an additional component to the speaking to understand, but it hasn't been the focus of the whole OGS program in the past.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. Wow, very thorough. And I want to encourage anybody else who has questions, similar questions or different questions, please drop them in the chat. And you also touched on this, Malia, earlier in the conversation about how our different administrations have changed, and with the different administrations changing, the legalities of traveling to Cuba have changed. So what kind of things do we need to be thinking about as we navigate the legalities?
Thank you so much. Yes, legality is always the biggest, almost historically the biggest challenge that I personally have faced with Cuba over the years, because it's always changing and there's loopholes and all kinds of things that we have to be abreast upon. And basically, it's my legal responsibility to do our due diligence to make sure every single trip is in compliance. Altruvistas, like other tour operators, we have permission by the U.S. Treasury Department to engage in financial transactions with Cuba, which would otherwise be illegal under the embargo, and because of the Trading with the Enemy Act. So it's technically not illegal for you to go to Cuba. It's illegal for you to go and spend money to Cuba. So, they get you, even buying that airplane ticket or what have you, that's how they get you. So the fines and things like that have been very intense. They threaten you with 10 years in jail and $250,000 penalty and these kinds of things. And they have different administrations, have gone after people and fined people historically. So that's something to, be aware of. But of course, there's different, what we call general licenses, as well as specific licenses that allow you to travel to Cuba legally. And so, for example, our particular program usually is facilitated with support for the Cuban people, apoyando al pueblo cubano. And what that means is that, we're staying at places, we're using, speakers, we're going to paladares, which are privately run restaurants, we're supporting the local economy with your tourist dollars and really engaging, just with average Cubans. And so you're supporting Cubans through your money and through your time and through your exchange. So that's how most people are traveling to Cuba on OGS. There are also times where people can use it as a tax write-off and travel as a professional doing professional development in Cuba. So say you are, also an educator or teaching, and you've got your methodology and you're, making your notes and connecting things. Of course, you could chat with your tax person and see how to make that as a write-off. And then under that case, you would put your traveling as a professional under Cuba. In both of those situations, and then for those of us, like if I bring my kids to Cuba, I'm traveling with a family license. Other people travel with a religious license. If you're a government employee, you travel with a government employee. Anyway, so we could go on and on with the different categories of licensable general licenses would look like. But basically, those are what the loopholes are. They're legal that allow you to go. And we will, after people sign up and have their orientation, AB has what we call a Chava affidavit. And that's basically just a form that you keep for your records, peace of mind for traveling, where you fill in your name and the correct box legally that you're traveling under. You put in your information and then you keep that form. And the reason I ask people to keep it is just because if people are applying for a federal job or a State Department job or even a state, who knows what the political swings go, but a state job, anything where you're going through a background check, like GEOS, the Global Entry Program, which I'm a huge supporter of. So they may ask for legal documentation showing how you were legally in Cuba. And so sometimes people go, Malia, I lost it. Can you send me one? I'm like, yeah, I got you. You're on this trip. Here's your itinerary. But I just tell people, keep that letter with your taxes for the 7 years, and it's just a legal support document for your trip. So again, you're going under support for the Cuban people. What it means to go legally is that you're not going for just fun in the sun. So, this isn't tourism for tourism's sake, even though the Cubans see it as tourism because you're going for educational tourism. From the U.S. government point of view, you're going for support for the Cuban people. It's not tourism like fun in the sun. Granted, you may have a little time to have a little fun in the sun, and we want you to have fun during the whole trip and have a good time and be healthy and really enjoy yourself and your experience, which you will. But at the same time, it's not like you can go to Cuba legally and just hang out for 7 days on a beach. That would be an absolute trouble, from the way that the terms of our policies are written, which is ridiculous because exactly. I can bring people to North Korea, and I can bring people to Iran, and I still don't have these same requirements that we do. Now, with regards to legality, so what we always said people is like, we've created this super rich program. Legally, you've got to do 40 hours during the week. And then you can have a little bit of time. Like say, for example, you come in with a group, have your experience, and then, of course, we're action-packed days, right? So you may want to spend 1 or 2 days on your own afterwards. You can do that. You can still do that legally because, a professional is only doing 40 hours of work a week. They're not working on the weekend. So you could absolutely take advantage of your weekend and have a little bit of downtime. And I recommend it for after the trip. not before. The reason being is that right now, as you know, people are coming in with negative. Well, we got into COVID, but the negative COVID test and then testing upon arrival. So the first day, right now, the way the procedures work is you will be tested upon arrival. So if you have to be tested and staying at the guest house with the group where we're staying, we kind of want that process to be together, so that way we're bringing in speakers and just taking care of everything for that first, 18 hours so that we can start the trip together and just know everybody is tested negative. But yeah, we'll see how the things everything's moving so quick in the world of travel, and which we'll get back to in a minute. But basically, you can stay a little bit later after the trip. There are other requirements. For example, your ATM cards and credit cards won't work. So it's a cash is king, cash is economy. So you have to bring even a little extra emergency money or souvenir money. You fall in love with some artwork you didn't expect to. You cannot put it on a credit card. So, there's other kinds of things that we'll get into more specific with the orientation, like the departure calls. We'll go into some of those things as detail, and we will review the legality as well, what you can bring back in terms of Cuban exports, and what you can spend. We'll go through those, but there are some other kinds of things legally. But again, the trip's legal, and so you can have the peace of mind knowing that we're doing all of our work to make sure that we're in full compliance. Yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's very thorough. I feel safer already because you've got it covered. You've got all of the experience. OGS has experience now too, so we're good. And you already touched on the COVID thing. That's here for all of us, and many of us are probably concerned about that. Well, how do we prepare to travel to Cuba with COVID all around?
Yeah, thank you. And many blessings to, I always say bendición to anybody who's been touched by COVID in our lives. I think almost all of us have in one way, shape, or form. From a very selfish professional point of view, I had 12 trips lined up last March, and 11 of them canceled, right? Because it was everything was shutting down, boom, boom, boom. So, it's really exciting to be able to start to, work and plan some of these really great programs again, journeys like OGS. And now with regards to COVID, there's, of course, mass vaccination protocols that are rolling out around the world. That is true also with Cuba. Cuba has a pretty amazing and wonderful biotech and health industry as well. And so they have produced their own vaccine that have been in clinical studies. It's gone through three different phases, and they are in the process of vaccinating their population. My godbrother is a geriatric doctor, and he's been personally out there in the streets of Old Havana, population dense, working with elders, to vaccinate. And so, I'm really happy that, that is happening for the health of the population there. Of course, there's been definite swings up and down through, the last few months. In fact, we had a January trip, which we had 10 or 11 people with OGS confirmed, and everybody, we were ready to go. And 4 or 5 days before, the Cuba closed its borders again. And it did so because the infection rate with people coming in and Cuban Americans coming back in and Cubans returning back home, it was causing a major spike. And of course, population density in really rich cities, and people don't have often the economic resources to buy all the Lysol or, these other things. So the contagion rate had spiked back up. The death rates in Cuba are really low. And so they do have medications that were helping people survive. So the mortality wasn't as intense as it unfortunately has been throughout the States. And of course, the medical system there is very good. And there's family doctors at every level and provincial hospitals and major hospitals in each province. So the fact of the matter is, even if you are a rural farmer, you're still guaranteed access to the medical care and medical system. So again, Cuba should be well afoot in terms of its own internal domestic vaccination protocols. It's also producing what they say is 100 million vaccines. Yeah. Their population is a little bit over 11 million. And so that means the rest of them will be sent pretty much for free or very low cost to other places throughout the Americas, Caribbean, and Africa, which is wonderful as well. And then, for those of us with OGS, I know many of us in my community throughout the United States are getting vaccinated now. with all of the different vaccinations. And so, you know, that is, of course, a very personal choice. At this point in time, Cuba has not said it's required to come in and have that. And so the way it has been is that you take a test 72 hours before you fly. And you're negative, and that's good because then you know, like, oh, I'm good to go. And then when you are tested upon arrival, so it's the same thing that we have here in Hawaii, you know, to manage the transmission, of course, of the coronavirus. So, yeah. So with regards, that's kind of what they're doing now. They test you. And then they're asking us as a group, because we're authorized through the Ministry of Tourism and through the Ministry of Agriculture. We just are waiting for our results that first night. So we get in, have our meet and greet, our welcome mojito, you know, have a great dinner. In the morning, we'll have some of the, you know, the speakers, the Ministry of Agriculture come and share with us. And then we'll be able to get our tests back, be all good to go, and then have, of course, lunch and go out to our city tour and continue and really start our program in the streets and in the fields of Cuba. With regards to COVID protocol, we will, again, with AV, we'll go through whoever is signed up for the trip in June, for example, will come together and we'll talk about what the appropriate comfort levels feel for everyone. We're traveling as an intentional community. Like you said, a lot of the time the program is outdoors. So people can wear masks, but could also take off their mask and be in the air, 8 feet apart or whatever it is.
Wonderful.
So we have to have those conversations about what feels comfortable. You know, and so maybe somebody with asthma or a compromised immune system that may or may not have been vaccinated, you know, you may need to be able to come and share what feels comfortable with you. So that is going to be a personal conversation that we have, and we do as a collective as well. We've talked, normally we have some of our meals all together, like the beginning ones, the big long table. And then sometimes, you know, we have little small talks, but we can also talk about, you know, do you pod? Do we have your roommate and this other roommate, and you kind of pod for your meals together so you feel comfortable eating and taking off your mask? So those are things, but I will be encouraging everybody, of course, you know, you bring your mask so you can wash and wear. You will definitely bring your hand sanitizer. You know that in order for the places in Cuba to be operational, they have to go through their quality checks for health and safety and cleanliness. So the hotels will be bleaching and wiping things down. The local providers will as well. The buses will as well. But I think it's really important, you know, if you see those extra little like Lysol like wipes and stuff, you know, go ahead and grab some, bring them with you. And it's just peace of mind. You know, you get into your room, clean that, you know, clean the phone, clean the remote control, clean the light switch. Just, you know, I'm still doing that. So I think it's always a best practice anyway. And maybe there's an extra one that Organic Grower School brings, and they wipe down the bus a little bit here and there. We used to do a little bit more sharing of water. You know, everybody brings their own water, and then we have like a giant thing we try to fill in the bus during the day. But maybe, you know, it's one person touching that big water jug and not everyone. So, you know, those are things just that we have to now think about that weren't in our consciousness before. I think that's a reality for sure. So what I will say is, you know, if you're thinking about coming, think about what feels right to you, and, you know, have those conversations so that, you know, you feel like you're being honored with what your specific needs are, and then being with a group. But I think one of the things that I feel very confident about is, you know, I do feel comfortable with the health protocols in Cuba. I know that the medical system is excellent. And those are all very, very, very reassuring for sure.
All right. Thank you for that. Now, a question just popped up here. What happens with COVID upon return to the U.S.? Now, are you, I'm not sure what they're
domestic travel and international travel. Yeah, so I know some of the states have had different requirements, you know, for coming back in. Like here in Hawaii, we have to test, right? So I have to do my 72 hours and my test and test it upon arrival. I know other states are just fully open, and more are opening, and they're like, you're flying back into Utah, or you're flying back into Texas, or you're flying back into Florida, and they may not be having any of those.
So it kind of just depends on where you're flying back into, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yeah, most likely. But I think, you know, with our group, most of you will be clustered on American Airlines, you know, from the Carolinas, or from of course, the Southeast, you know, through maybe Miami and then through. So we'll have to see what and keep an eye on that if there's anything that changes. But I do know there's all this discourse around the vaccine passport. But to be honest with you, I've been running trips around the world for so long, and we in certain places when we go to Africa, India, other places, we're traveling with a yellow fever vaccination chart. Like you've got your little World Health Organization chart showing that you've got your tetanus shot and your polio and things like that. So, if you do have that little yellow card, or if you need one, you can go to your doctor, go to the travel clinic, and they'll put those vaccinations on there. So you have it and you can look at it and you can also travel with it. So I think we're moving in that direction, but again, we still are constantly monitoring it. So as we get a little bit closer to the departure of the trip, we'll definitely know. But the airlines will also inform us if there's any changes. We do know that all the flights to Cuba, had been basically canceled through early May. Yeah. So, as things open back up, we were told that we could open back up from our local partners in June, that they were recommending, come in June, let's just get through, this craziness for the spring, and then we can take it forward. So again, that's more information for when people are actually signed up that we'll be working with AV with Organic Growers School.
Got it. That's good enough to get us started. Thank you for that. And that's going to wrap us up. Avi, I'm going to call you back into this conversation because now we want to talk about the cost of the trip, and you may have more details to share on that. And we can't hear you.
It had to happen
there
at
you
least
are.
once. The muting unmuted. Thank you both so much. And just to elaborate a little bit, like just in general in the US, I don't know that there's ever been sort of like a required or enforced quarantine upon returning to the US, but I do think it's really important to just check in about in your community beyond maybe what the regulations are, what folks that you're sharing space with feel comfortable with. And hopefully, information is growing every single day. So maybe by then we'll know that if we're vaccinated and we're exposed, then we're still not able to transmit it. So that's something that we're getting more information about every day. And as has been happening for the whole year, it's changing all the time. So I think it's an evolving issue. It's something that we want to talk about, set norms for with the group intentionally, and also that, we'll just be getting more information from, the authorities and scientists as time moves on. So just talking a little bit about the cost of the trip, it is currently $2,950. This includes accommodations, speaker fees, as Malia was mentioning earlier, transportation, and 2 to 3 meals a day. It does not include airfare or tips for our guides and speakers, which we do encourage folks to bring and budget for. I will say that on our website, there's a lot more detailed information. I don't want to read out the whole list of what it does and doesn't cover, but I did just want to make really clear that we do have scholarships available. It is, it's important to us that this trip be accessible to folks. So we do have limited numbers of scholarships available still for the November and January trips. As of now, we have filled all of our scholarships for June, but I do encourage anybody who is interested in a scholarship to check out that information or how to apply for a scholarship on our website. There's also opportunities to do some work trading and exchange for some of the scholarships. So we do have a lot of options, and we also do encourage you. We are working on building out a little resource list of some other organizations that offer external scholarships. I know Andrea told me yesterday that the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Center, SARE, if you go to their page, sare.org/grants, they do have information on the types of projects that they fund. And I know that a project that I'm working on right now is coming up with a full list of that so we can have it visible on our website and make it really easy for those of you who are interested in getting scholarships. And also just another idea is often universities will help fund these kinds of trips. So I don't know if Malia, if you wanted to add anything about the cost of the trip and kind of what's included, but we did have one other audience question well, yeah, I'll let you if you wanted to add anything that you felt that I missed.
Yeah, no, it's just, yeah, I mean, you just said it. It covers, all of those fees and things like that. Just, some of the tips. We do include some tips, but not all of them. So the guide and driver, we'll send out suggestions for, what to budget for that. But on the meals that are included, like the group meals, welcome dinner, farewell dinner, some of our dinners and lunches, we do build in the community tips. So that way you don't feel like you have to leave $1 or $2 like every time you sit down. But when you're out on your own, you will be tipping. And I would say the service industry is one that, of course, with tourism, we employ 1 out of 11 people on the planet. And so many of us have been really struggling, of course, because of COVID. And so, if you tip 15, 20% back home, I would say tip a minimum of 10% in Cuba. If you're out having, some great mojitos at night or having dinner with another traveler in the evening and your bill was, $20, please throw down 2 at least. So people really do live off of the service economy in Cuba. And just like other places around the world. So yeah, tips are really important. We also do build in like an extra $1 a day for water. I just wanted to mention that. So we have it available on the bus. If it's hot, you will need more. So you could do a little collective where everybody throws in $1 or $2 more bucks. And then, the driver, while you guys are out doing something, he'll go to the store and pick up some more big jugs and things like that. Because we do really want you to stay hydrated. So, it's really important. So we try to build in a little extra and it usually just kind of works out. But sometimes it doesn't, especially if you're, walking around in the sun and things like that. So.
Absolutely. Thank you for that reminder. And that actually is related to the question that we got from the audience, which was if you could just talk about a little bit about what the weather looks like in June versus November versus January, or if it's quite different or not.
Yeah, it is varied for sure. So June, well, actually, the official beginnings of the hurricane season or kind of summer season is officially like May through October. And so what typically happens in June is it's still pretty nice. It starts to get warmer. It'll definitely start to raise up in the day to the 80s. Usually by the second week in June or early July, you start to get more of the humidity. So it's easy to, take a look and see when the temperature cycles are in the Caribbean, but of course, it's pretty much always pretty beautiful. Like I did mention, with climate change, sometimes we're having these little cold fronts where people are like, oh my gosh, it's like 60 degrees, I need a sweater, and things like that. But you won't have the cold weather that you often do on the East Coast or the super hot times that I avoid. And I tell people, unless you're going for like a specific event, it's really hot and uncomfortable. So I avoid personally July, August, and September because I just feel like it's just so hot. Like you take a shower and you walk out and you just feel like you just walked out of a sauna. It can get really hot. So anyway, some people love it. Some people love it hot and that's just what they love. So hey, if that's you, then you can, the summer months will be really great. But in June, it should be still pretty comfortable. I mean, it may get down into depending on where we're at and of course, the topography of the landscape. The provinces may be a little bit cooler than Havana. Havana may be a little bit more balmy. So it really depends. But I would say, it's important to layer up, bring a lightweight rain jacket, a poncho, just in case you get some sprinkles. And, you want to make sure you have a lightweight jacket, again, for the buildings or for the places we're staying. Sometimes the air conditioning can feel a little cool or the bus can feel cool and we're going from one place to the other. And so from a temperature, maybe it's like 80 outside, but inside it's all of a sudden 70 and it's a little cold. So definitely realize, we try to make sure everybody's comfortable, but some people are a little hotter and some people are a little colder. So you just want to make sure that you're taking care of your creature comforts. So June will be warmer and a little bit more humid. And November is, of course, November through April are usually considered like the drier times. So a little bit of a less rain, but there have been rainy seasons, cold fronts, and even hurricane seasons that go through early November. So it's one of those things where we just never really know about climate change and climate chaos. I mean, it's a really important question for agriculture, but for those of us in tourism too, it's like most of the time it's like, oh yeah, it's October's kind of shoulder, May, June's kind of shoulder season in terms of weather. And then it's really, really hot, like I said before, like July, August, September. And so with regards to November, it would be maybe a little bit drier. The same thing with January, a little bit drier, a little bit cooler. Sometimes it actually does get rain in January and does get like the Frente de Frío that I was mentioning. So it's just kind of hard to know. But I always say, like, just layer up, have great shorts, breathable fabrics, something, of course, if you're on the farm doing work, you can get dirty and clean off well. So yeah, I hope that answers it. Always bring a hat, if you're out in the sun.
Sun or rain, hat is helpful. And I'm personally a humidity lover myself, so I'm excited. I'm going to be there in June. So I did get a question asking just about the average round trip airfare from Georgia. I did a quick look. I don't know, Malia, you might have better ideas about this. It looks like it's anywhere between $350 and $500. Usually there is a stopover in Miami, but it's anywhere in that range for the round trip. Does that sound about average, Malia? I'm sure it's a little bit different from each place. And the quick search I did, it was kind of coming up with like Raleigh and Phoenix and stuff. So and I'm seeing a range between $350 and $500. And hopefully that will stay relatively stable. And then just
January maybe a little bit more.
Okay.
January, because sometimes there's a higher tourist season. Like I said, November's shoulder, and so is June. So usually the rates are a little bit lower. But sometimes December and January, the prices do go up a little bit. But yeah, you're right. That's the range for sure.
Very helpful. Thank you. And then we just have one last question, and then I think we'll wrap up. We are planning. Thank you both for being so generous with your time. So this last question from the audience was, which dollar is preferred in Cuba, US or Canadian? But I think maybe it'd be great to just have a little bit about the currency, because I know that can be confusing for folks, and particularly, coming and preparing and needing to bring cash. I feel like that might be some useful information if you could share, Malia.
Yeah, so this is all changed. So anybody who's been to Cuba before, the reality now is very different. So Cuba actually had two currencies that it was using for the last 2-3 decades. So it had the Moneda Nacional, which is the Cuban peso, CUP, C-U-P, and then it had a CUC. So all of us as tourism, involved with tourism or foreign direct investment, anybody from anywhere around the world would basically come in with your hard currency, whether it was Canadian, USD, Euro, Yen, etc., and exchange that currency into CUC, which is the Cuban convertible currency that was used for the economy. Now the country's been going through a little bit of a shock and awe, not just because of COVID, but because of this monetary shift within the country. So the CUC is officially gone. And as of June 1st, there will be no more in circulation. So those of us that were hoarding a bunch outside of the country are trying to get it back on the ground so people can exchange it before it's just paper. But yeah, so the CUC and the rules around the CUC, which you look online, are not going to hold any grain of truth anymore. So it used to be that we would exchange it, and it was like 87 to 1, like you would get for $100 you get 87 CUC. That's not true anymore. So now the US dollar is pegged with the Cuban peso at 24 to 1. So for every $1, you will get 24 pesos. And there's not the same need to change. The economy has gone through a little bit of a dollarization to try to get more of the hard currency and capital into the island. So what they've allowed people to do, those of us with, for example, family, you have a local bank card, and you can put in money in the national currency or in like euros or US dollars. So US dollars are pretty accessible now. And that's, a lot of people just want them. So, we can tip in dollars, you can buy in dollars, but you will probably get change back in CUP, which is the Moneda Nacional. So those are things that have definitely shifted. And I hope that is clear. But again, in the orientation materials, we'll have the little 24 to 1, and we'll remind you, and you will be able to see the old currency and what the old new currency looks like. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. And yeah, just to build on that, I guess, a little bit, this is sort of just a general informational session. If and when you do choose to join us and register for one of the trips, we'll be having, prep sessions. We have an orientation package with a lot more detailed information on the specific concerns of the trip and exactly what you should bring to prepare. But we just sort of wanted to give you the broad picture of what this trip looks like and why it's so important to us. So thank you, Andrea and Malia, for your wonderful guiding through this discussion. And if you still have any remaining questions, if you feel like there was anything unanswered, you can please feel free to email me at avi@organicgrowerschool.org. I will put that in the chat. And if you don't have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and register. We do have those 3 trips and registration is open right now. Those are for June 22nd to July 1st, November 30th to December 9th, and January 4th to January 13th. So we hope to see you there, and thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you.